Welcome and thank you for standing by. All participants are on a listen-only mode for the duration of today's conference. Today's session is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to your host, Rachel Marks from the U.S. Census Bureau. Rachel, you may begin.
Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel Marks, and I am the Chief of the Racial Statistics Branch in the Population Division here at the Census Bureau. I'm joined today by my colleague, Allie Koritz, a Senior Analyst in the Racial Statistics Branch, and we also have several subject matter experts with us on the call today. We're pleased to discuss today's release of the proof of concept for the detailed demographic and housing characteristics file A. Please stick around until the end of the webinar if you're able to do so. After you close the webinar, you'll see a short anonymous evaluation survey. We want to ensure that the webinars meet your needs, so thank you in advance for giving us your feedback so we can improve future webinars. The Detailed Demographic and Housing Characteristics File A, or the Detailed DHCA, is unique, and it may be quite different from other census data products you're familiar with. Today, we'll provide you with important information to be aware of when reviewing the proof of concept. We're excited to be able to provide you with this proof of concept, and we look forward to receiving your feedback. Before we publish the data that you provide, the Census Bureau must apply a process called disclosure avoidance to protect the confidentiality of respondents. The Census Bureau has historically tabulated data for detailed race and ethnicity groups and American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages while protecting information provided by respondents. Over time, more and more granular census data have been published, and advances in data science, more powerful computers, and externally accessible big data has increased the risk of identifying individuals from published statistics. To mitigate this risk, the Census Bureau is implementing new disclosure avoidance methods for the 2020 census. The 2020 Census Disclosure Avoidance System is based on the framework of differential privacy. Differential privacy adds noise or variations from the actual count to the collected data. The Census Bureau's goal is to meet the data needs of data users while protecting respondents' confidentiality. The feedback we receive from you is critical as we finalize the settings for the detailed DHCA. There are several products from the 2020 census that include data on race and ethnicity. Population counts and data on the voting age population for major race and ethnic groups such as the Hispanic, Asian, and Black or African American populations were released in the redistricting summary file in August 2021. Population and housing characteristics on major race and ethnic groups are planned to be released in the demographic profile and the demographic and housing characteristics file, or DHC, in May 2023. The supplemental DHC will include additional population and housing characteristics about the major race and ethnic groups. The release date for this product is still being determined. The detailed DHC-A and the detailed DHC-B are the successors to the Summary File 2 and the American Indian and Alaska Native Summary Files that were released in the 2010 census. These files provide data for disaggregated race and ethnic groups and American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages. The detailed DHCA is planned for release in August 2023, and the release date for the detailed DHCB is still being determined. Today's webinar focuses on the detailed DHCA and specifically the proof of concept, which was released today. The detailed DHCA will provide population counts and sex and age statistics for approximately 370 detailed racial and ethnic groups and approximately 1,200 American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages. Population counts for detailed racial and ethnic groups such as German, Lebanese, Jamaican, Chinese, Native Hawaiian, and Mexican, and detailed American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages such as the Navajo Nation will be available in the detailed DHCA. This product will also provide statistics on sex by age for selected age categories for detailed racial and ethnic population groups and American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages that meet certain population thresholds. This product will include data for the nation, states, counties, tracts, places, and American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian homeland areas. The detailed DHCA uses an adaptive design that allows us to provide more detailed statistics for racial and ethnic groups with larger populations, while at the same time ensuring sufficient confidentiality protections. The detailed DHCA will include data for detailed race and ethnicity groups and American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages. Data will be included for detailed and regional race and Hispanic origin groups and tribes and villages. Detailed groups include groups such as Puerto Rican, Chinese, Lebanese, the Navajo Nation, Samoan, and many, many more. Regional groups, which are new for 2020, include groups such as Caribbean, East Asian, American Indian, Polynesian, and more. Data will be included for detailed and regional race alone and race alone or in any combination groups. Race alone groups refer to people who reported a single entry, such as Korean, and no other detailed race group. Race alone or in any combination groups include people who reported a single entry, such as Korean, and people who reported that entry with one or more other races, such as Korean and Thai or Korean and Native Hawaiian. This represents the maximum number of people who reported as that detailed race group, either alone or in any combination with one or more additional race groups. So what does the proof of concept include? And you might be wondering, what exactly is this? Today's release of the proof of concept reflects the proposed differential privacy settings for the 2020 detailed DHCA. This includes the privacy loss budget, the margins of error, population thresholds, and levels of geography. In this product, we applied differential privacy using the SafeTab P algorithm to 2010 census data for tables that will be included in the 2020 detailed DHCA. When reviewing the product, data users should be mindful when analyzing comparisons to 2010 published data. In this product, differential privacy is applied to the non-private 2010 data, whereas the published 2010 data has undergone swapping, which is another type of disclosure avoidance. Therefore, some of the observed differences you see may be due to the two different privacy methods used. This product includes technical documentation, summary metrics, and examples of tabulated data for the public to analyze and provide us with their feedback. Now let's talk a little bit about what's not in the proof of concept. Unlike previous demonstration products released for the DHC that you may be familiar with, the proof of concept does not include summary files or complete 2010 census dataset with the new disclosure avoidance methodology applied. Instead, we have provided a subset of tabulated data for your review. Additionally, because this product was created using 2010 census data, it does not reflect the improvements made to the 2020 census question on race. This means that this product does not include the full range of detailed and regional groups that will be available in the final 2020 census detailed DHCA. More specifically, the proof of concept does not include any data on detailed white and detailed Black groups that will be tabulated for the first time in the 2020 census. The improvements to the race question and code list will be reflected in the final 2020 census detailed DHCA planned for release in August. There are several important differences between the differentially private algorithms used to protect data in the 2020 census data products. The redistricting data demographic and housing characteristics file and the demographic profile use the top-down algorithm, which was developed by the Census Bureau. In contrast, the detailed DHCA uses the SafeTab P algorithm, which was developed for the Census Bureau by Tumult Labs, a contractor with expertise in data privacy, in conjunction with subject matter experts at the Census Bureau. The top-down algorithm produces privacy-protected microdata that are then tabulated to create the final data products. In contrast, the SafeTab P algorithm produces privacy-protected tabulations for each individual geography, which are used in the final data product. In the top-down algorithm, counts are produced first for the US, and then counts for lower-level geographies are controlled to the US counts, so that all counts aggregate and are consistent, as you've seen in previous census data products. When aggregating data, it will generally get more accurate. In the SafeTab P algorithm, however, counts are produced for each individual geography. The data that are output are not required to aggregate. When aggregating data, it generally becomes more variable or less accurate the more data you aggregate, because you are also aggregating the noise. The data in the three products produced with the top-down algorithm, the redistricting summary file, the DHC, and the demographic profile, will be consistent with each other. However, the data in the detailed DHCA will not be consistent with any other 2020 census data products. And finally, the top-down algorithm meets some margins of error that are determined in advance, but not all, and it does not use an adaptive design. Whereas the SafeTab-P algorithm meets the predetermined margins of error 95% of the time and uses an adaptive design to determine the amount of data provided based on each racial and ethnic group's population size for a given geography. It's important for data users to be aware of the differences between the methodologies used to protect the data in the detailed DHCA and other census data products, including other 2020 census data products, ACS products, and 2010 census products that you might be familiar with. This product is unique and has some limitations data users need to be aware of. Now I'll pass it over to Ali to talk about the adaptive design and how it works in this product.
Perfect. Thanks, Rachel. The detailed DHCA uses an adaptive design, so let's walk through what that means. For some predetermined population groups, SafeTab-P, the algorithm used to produce these data, will not use adaptivity. Based on data from the 2010 census, some groups will be too small to receive a sex by age table. Detailed groups with a national population smaller than 50 in the 2010 census are preset to receive total population counts only. This is determined in advance and allows us to spend more privacy loss budget to produce total population counts for these small groups. For these groups, a noise-infused total population count will always be calculated, but no sex and age statistics will be available. All other population groups, that is groups that had a national population of at least 50 in the 2010 census, and groups that we did not collect data for in the 2010 census, are eligible to go through the adaptive design. First, we calculate a noise-infused total population count for each population group using a small portion of the privacy loss budget. Second, we determine if the population group meets the thresholds to produce a total population count only or one of the three possible sex by age tables. Finally, we use the remainder of the privacy loss budget to calculate the sex by age data when applicable. This process is repeated for each combination of geography and race or ethnicity group. The amount of sex by age data a population group receives will be based on a combination of population thresholds and the level of geography. If a group meets population thresholds to receive sex by age data, they will receive one of three possible tables: a table with 4 age categories, a table with 9 age categories, or a table with 23 age categories. This approach will allow us to produce more data for populations based on their size within a geographic area while ensuring respondent confidentiality. The Summary File 2, an American Indian and Alaska Native summary file, used a single population threshold of 100 for every table and every geographic area. In the proof of concept for the detailed DHCA, multiple population thresholds are used to determine the amount of data a population group receives. The population threshold for all groups to receive a population count at all levels of geography are less than 100. We heard from data users that population counts were critical, so we prioritized providing accurate population counts for detailed race and ethnicity groups and AIAN tribes and villages in this product. This graphic shows the minimum population counts, or thresholds, required for a detailed group, such as Samoan or Salvadoran, to receive each type of data at the national or state levels in the proof of concept. For data to be published, a group must meet these minimum population counts within a specific geographic area. At the national and state levels, detailed groups with a noise-infused population count of less than 500 will only receive a total population count. Detailed groups with a noise-infused population between 500 and 999 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 4 age categories. Detailed groups with a noise-infused population between 1,000 and 6,999 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 9 age categories. Detailed groups with a noise-infused population of at least 7,000 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 23 age categories. The margin of error for groups that receive a total only and individual sex by age counts at the national and state levels in the proof of concept is 3, with a 95% confidence interval. This means we expect these noise-infused counts to vary from their true counts by no more than plus or minus 3, 95% of the time. The margin of error for the total population for groups with sex by age data is aggregated from those noise-infused sex by age counts. This leads to a higher MOE for the total population count because each individual sex by age count is noise-infused. As a result, totals created from these counts combine the noise from each individual count, leading to noisier totals. This is discussed further in the proof of concept. At lower levels of geography, which includes counties, tracts, places, and AIANNH areas, adaptive design works the same way as at the national and state levels, but different minimum population counts or thresholds are used. Detailed groups with noise-infused populations of less than 22 in these geographic areas will not have data published for that geography. For example, a county with a count of less than 22 for a given detailed group will not have data published for that group, but it will have data available for all groups with a population of at least 22. Utilizing a population threshold of 22 is an improvement from 2010, when groups needed to meet a minimum population count of 100 to have published counts at any given geography level. At the county, place, tract, and AIANNH area levels, detailed groups that have a noise-infused population between 22 and 999 in a geographic area will receive a total population count only. Detailed groups with a noise-infused population between 1,000 and 4,999 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 4 age categories. Detailed groups with a noise-infused population between 5,000 and 19,999 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 9 age categories. Detailed groups with noise-infused populations of 20,000 or more will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 23 age categories. The margin of error for groups that receive a total only and individual sex by age counts at the county, tract, place, and AIANNH areas in the proof of concept is 11, with a 95% confidence interval. The proof of concept also uses adaptive design to provide data for regional groups, such as East Asian or Caribbean. Regional groups that have a noise-infused population up to 4,999 at the national and state levels will receive total population counts only. Regional groups with noise-infused population counts between 5,000 to 19,999 will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 4 age categories. Regional groups with a noise-infused population between 20,000 and 149,999 will receive total population counts and a sex by age table with 9 age categories. Regional groups with a noise-infused population of 150,000 or more will receive a total population count and a sex by age table with 23 age categories. The margin of error for regional groups that receive a total only and individual sex by age counts at the national and state levels in the proof of concept is 50, with a 95% confidence interval. You may have noticed that the threshold and margins of error for regional groups are larger than for detailed groups. This was designed this way because regional groups are much larger than detailed groups. Regional groups with a population count less than 94 in counties, tracts, and places will not have data published for that geography. For example, a regional group in a specific county that has a noise-infused population count of less than 94 will not have data published for that group, but it will have data available for all groups with a population of at least 94. All other population thresholds for regional groups at lower geographies are the same as for the national and state levels. The margin of error at these lower level geographies is 50 with a 95% confidence interval, which is the same as at the national and state levels for regional groups. Now I'll pass it back to Rachel to talk about the data within the proof of concept and important guidance for data users.
Thank you, Allie. In our review of the proof of concept data, we found that over 95% of the noise-infused counts for each racial and ethnic category were within the target margins of error that Allie just described. The average difference between the enumerated or true count and the noise-infused count for racial and ethnic groups in American Indian and Alaska Native tribes and villages at the national level range from plus or minus 0.5 to plus or minus 1.35. We found that less than 1% of noise-infused counts were outliers for each racial and ethnic category. We define outliers as any count that was outside their margin of error by more than twice the margin of error's value. So for example, if the margin of error was 3, a noise-infused count of 7 was considered to be an outlier because it's more than double the margin of error. We encourage you to explore the accuracy of the data by using the summary of metrics published with today's proof of concept. We want to emphasize that this product is unique and unlike other census data products you may have used in the past. Data users may observe some improbable data in the proof of concept. These data are necessary noise that help protect respondents' confidentiality. Additionally, unlike other 2020 census data products you may be familiar with, this product is unique in that it is not required to have internal consistency. This helps to ensure bias is not introduced into the data. As a result, data users may observe inconsistencies, including some implausible results in the detailed DHCA. It's important to know that while these inconsistencies may seem nonsensical, they help to preserve the random noise and unbiased data in the product, as well as preserve the margins of error with 95% confidence. We've described and provided examples of the types of data you may encounter in detail in the proof of concept, and we'll highlight some important information for data users in the next few minutes. Finally, data users may encounter unavailable data because of suppression implemented on implausible data or because populations with small counts at lower levels of geography did not meet the population thresholds. In the proof of concept, we provide important information about the limitations of the data and guidance for data users. There are two key pieces of information data users need to be aware of when using data from this product. First, data users should always use the published count for the specific combination of race and ethnic group and geographic area they're interested in. Second, we do not recommend creating custom aggregations as this will result in less accurate data. This guidance is different than guidance for products that use the top-down algorithm. Recall that in the top-down algorithm, which the redistricting summary file and the DHC file use, as you aggregate, the data become more accurate. However, with the SaveTab-P algorithm, the detail that the detailed DHCA uses, the more data you aggregate, the less accurate the data will become. So let's look at an example of this. In the proof of concept, you'll notice that detail groups may not sum to their corresponding regional group. If a data user adds up all detail groups in a regional group, they may get a different total than the total count for the regional group. For example, in the proof of concept, the population for the Caribbean regional group is 7,828,451. However, when we sum the counts in the proof of concept for the individual detail groups that make up the Caribbean regional group, we get a total of 7,828,335. This is a difference of 116 people. This difference occurs because noise is applied once to the regional group total, whereas the aggregation of individual detail groups compounds the noise applied to each detail group's individual data, resulting in a noisier total. Because of this, we recommend using the published noise-infused counts when available instead of creating your own custom aggregations. Similarly, we recommend that data users do not create their own custom geographies because values from lower-level geographies may not sum to values from higher-level geographies. For example, in the proof of concept, the population for the Native Hawaiian alone or in any combination population in the United States is 527,209. When we sum the counts for the Native Hawaiian alone or in any combination population in all states in the proof of concept, we get a total of 527,108. This is a difference of 101. Because of this, we recommend using the published counts for the geography you're interested in rather than creating your own custom aggregations. And finally, in the proof of concept, you might observe instances where a count for a race or ethnic group is larger at a lower level of geography than it is at a higher level of geography. For example, in the proof of concept, the count for Village of Red Devil alone is 2 in the United States, but it's 3 in Alaska. In this example, the group's population count in Alaska is 1% larger than the US total population count. This difference occurs because SafeTab-P, the differential privacy algorithm, outputs a count for each individual geographic level independent of the other geographies. We recommend using the count associated with your geographic level of interest. The information we just provided and the information in the proof of concept reflect the proposed differential privacy settings for the 2020 detailed DHCA. This includes the privacy loss budget, the margins of error, the population thresholds, and levels of geography. We're asking that you, the data users, review the proof of concept materials, assess the proposed levels of accuracy, the population thresholds, the geographies, and provide us with your feedback. Specifically, we would like to know from you, if we release the detailed DHCA using the settings in the proof of concept, will your work be impacted positively, negatively, or not at all? It's critical we receive your feedback before the disclosure avoidance settings for the detailed DHCA are finalized this spring. To provide feedback, please email 2020DAS@census.gov by Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. If you need any assistance with your review or have any questions, please send them to 2020DAS@census.gov, and our team will be happy to assist you. We thank you for joining us today. We're going to take some questions in a moment, but just a reminder that we do have a short evaluation survey that will appear when you exit this webinar. Your answers are anonymous, so please do let us know how we can improve future webinars. So I'm going to switch over to the questions answers and see what kind of questions you all have. So the first question is there a list available of which 370 detailed races will be available and how they are decided and coded from the race and origin questions on the census? Thank you very much for that question. This list was published after the 2020 census in the technical documentation for the Summary File 2 and the American Indian and Alaska Native Summary File. We do plan to publish this list again, what will be available for this file when the product is released in this August. In the meantime, though, if you're interested in seeing what detailed races and ethnicities and tribes and villages we collected data on that will be potentially tabulated, I would direct you to our redistricting summary file technical documentation to our code list there. That shows all of the disaggregated data that we collected data for in the 2020 census, including the new detailed white and black groups and also other improvements we made to other racial and ethnic groups. I see there's a question. Can you please explain slide 21 a bit more, why the count for Alaska is larger than the count for the US? Allie, would you like to speak a little bit more about this example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in order to protect data user or respondent confidentiality, the SafeTab-P algorithm infuses noise into each unprotected count, and it does this regardless of geography level. And so what that means is, unlike previous data releases from the census, the SafeTab-P algorithm doesn't make the total nation count the final count. Each individual geography gets its own noise infusion. And so as a result of that, lower levels of geography can actually have higher counts than higher levels of geography, which is what we see in this case, where the count for the Village of Red Devil alone is actually 1 person higher in Alaska than it is in the United States. And again, that's a result of the algorithm and the noise it injects in order to protect respondent confidentiality.
Great, thank you, Allie. Okay, I see we have another question here in the chat. Will the tabulations contain negative tabulations? If not, how does the algorithm handle them? Are they simply changed to 0 or is it more complicated? Thank you for that question, Jonathan. That's a really great question. We do speak about this in the proof of concept a little bit about the negative numbers. There is always, because the way the algorithm works, it is possible for the noisy measurements to have negative numbers in them. But we do implement some post-processing into this product. So we will not be releasing negative numbers in the final product. All right, the next question. There's a question here, are there any constraints such as non-negativity that are also planned for the DHCA? I can see situations where even for 4 sex by age categories, you could get a negative count. I assume it would be rare though. So yeah, as I just mentioned, there are some cases where it's rare that they're in the noisy measurements, negative numbers can be a result of the application of differential privacy, though it's rare, and we are not going to be publishing those. There are some other instances that are discussed in the proof of concept. I'll ask Ali to speak about that, where we do have some other suppression that happens in the file related to some of the demographic reasonable constraints. So Ali, would you like to speak about that?
Yes, of course. So we suppress data in a situation which we already discussed, for example, which is where we have counts at sub-state geography levels that are either below 22 for detailed groups or 94 for regional groups. And these thresholds ensure that with a 99% certainty that we are not publishing true zeros, and these small statistically unreliable noise-infused counts are not going to be published. So this is another circumstance beyond negative numbers where we will also be suppressing some data.
Thank you, Ali. And there's a question in the chat about, are we being advised to not use the proof of concept data that has a noise-infused count, or is the noise-infused count also considered published? So thanks for that question. That's a great question. I'd like to take the opportunity to kind of clarify what we mean by that. The purpose of the reason we're releasing this proof of concept really is to demonstrate how the application of our disclosure avoidance methodology impacts the data. The official counts from the 2010 census still come from the 2010 American Indian and Alaska Native summary file and the 2010 summary file too. The noise-infused counts that you see in this file, they are just test data. They do not change what the official counts that were released after 2010 are. We do our testing for the new disclosure avoidance methodologies on the 2010 census data. When we talk about our current guidance for data users about using the published count versus not aggregating, that is what we mean by that is that if these are the settings that we use moving forward for 2020, that would be our guidance moving forward. We would be guiding you not to create your own custom aggregations for example, the Caribbean population, but instead use that published count for the Caribbean regional grouping. There's a question here about in the past, we've aggregated multiple tracks to build a neighborhood profile. Will there be a way to request special tabulations for neighborhoods or another way to create our own aggregations? Thanks for your question, Howard. I'm glad you're on the call. What would be important for us to hear is your feedback. I know you've already provided some about this, but just more feedback from you about these aggregations and what you're doing with them. This is part of the feedback process for this proof of concept, right? If this is the guidance moving forward, not to use caution when aggregating, we would want to know about this, that you typically do aggregate the data to create neighborhood profiles. This is our current guidance, and hearing from you will help us build guidance for the future. There is a question here, will we get tables with population by age alone to help fill the gap left by the threshold of 499 on the sex by age tables? Thank you for that question. Similar to the last response, right now, this is this is what we've proposed, including the POP threshold. So if these POP thresholds do not meet your use cases, we'd like to know that. As I mentioned, this is really our last opportunity for us to make any changes to this product, and that includes the population threshold. So if for some reason you have a use case for age data or sex and age data for groups that have POP counts less than 499, we'd really like to hear that from you. The current proposal is based upon data user feedback, conversations with stakeholders, tribal consultations that we've done over the past several years. So we're kind of going out here one last time to get your feedback on this product. So please, we look forward to hearing your feedback on that. There's a question here about how many 2020 census tracts will have any data in the sex by age in 32, I think in 23 categories in this product. So thank you for that question. Again, the proof of concept is based on 2010 census data. All of our data are testing for the new disclosure avoidance methods are based on 2010 census data. So at this time, we can't really release any information about what 2020 will look like, but taking a look at the metrics might provide some insights into what you could potentially expect for the 2020 census data. But just a reminder that this is based on 2010 census data. I see there's a question here. Some counties can have larger populations than states. Is it possible to reconsider age and sex thresholds for counties with large population? LA County has a total population of 10 million. Yeah, thank you for that feedback and that question. Again, please send us your feedback by March 2nd about this. We really appreciate that feedback. As I mentioned, these type of POP thresholds were built based on the feedback that we've heard to date. So if what we released today does not meet your needs, we really want to hear that from you. So thank you for that comment. That's something we'll take back. Where do we find the data files for the proof of concept? Great, thank you for that question. Someone is going to probably drop it in the chat if they haven't already done so that you have the link available. But on our website, we have available several different materials for you. We have the actual proof of concept, which Ali can talk a little bit more about what exactly is in that. We have some summary metrics. We have a infographic that talks about the adaptive design and the population thresholds. We have some example data for you. We have some information about the privacy loss budget allocation, as well as some frequently asked questions. So Ali, you want to just kind of give a little blurb about what people can expect if they haven't had a chance to look at the proof of concept yet?
Of course. So the proof of concept is your guide to understanding the current settings that we're using for the SafeTab-P algorithm if moving forward for the 2020 decennial, the 2020 detailed DHCA, pending your feedback. And so what you'll find in this document is we'll start out with a text section, like a technical document section that's going to explain to you the algorithm that's used, as well as how it compares to the top-down algorithm, which Rachel went into on our slides. And then there's also going to be a section that will talk to you about the 2010 data, because just a reminder, we're using the 2010 data, which does mean that we don't have all of the disaggregated detailed race and ethnicity data that we collected in the 2020 census that you will get in the final release in August. And then a good chunk of the proof of concept, and I do want to point out, it's about 20 pages, it's really user-friendly, is going through the adaptive design so that folks can understand and really get a sense of what tables they can expect and what data they can expect that their groups of interest, their racial and ethnic groups of interest will receive, and how that adaptive design works to determine what data they will receive. And then it goes into margins of error to make sure that people understand exactly what we mean when we say that these data have margins of error and how to interpret that, as well as what it means for total population counts of groups that have age by sex data to have larger aggregated margins of error, because those total counts are the aggregated sums of those noise-infused individual sex by age counts. And then the next section of this goes into those limitations that Rachel went over. So for example, with our guidance for data users, where we informed you, that lower levels of geographies may have higher counts than higher levels of geography, we walk through some of those improbable and inconsistent data scenarios that you may encounter in the proof of concept. And then lastly, we end with a call for you to give us your feedback, your good, your bad, your neutral feedback, please. And then we also let data users know what you can expect in the future with the detailed DHCB, which covers some tables that we've released in the 2010 census, but are not included in the proof of concept for the detailed DHCA.
Great, thank you, Allie. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A. And also, I'm just going to flip back to the public feedback request. We do really want to hear your feedback. So as Allie mentioned, positive feedback, negative feedback, neutral feedback. This is the last opportunity for data users to provide their feedback on the detailed DHCA. We are planning to make final decisions on the settings for this product this spring in order to release the product later this year. So we do welcome any and all feedback that you have on the product. So I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. So I think with that, with no other questions, I think we're going to go ahead and close out this webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate the time you took to join us and learn about today's proof of concept. And as a reminder, please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar so we can improve future offerings. Thank you and have a great day.
This concludes today's session. You may disconnect at this time. Thanks for joining us.